You may be seated. We're gathered here this morning to pay our last respects, to give a kavod achron to Simcha Zilberberg, Reb Simcha Bunim ben Chaim Zalman, beloved father, grandfather, friend, and character known worldwide. We have a short program. We're going to read a few kapitel of Tehillim, and then we'll have just a few speakers. The first kapitel will be read by Reb David Singer, close relative, and he'll be saying Tehillim and speaking on behalf of the Alexander Rebbe.
Michtam le David, Shemraini Yael Kuchasisi Vach, Umad Ladonoi Adonoi Utu Taivusi Balu Lechu, Ligdoisha Mashaburetz Haimu Vadirai Kol Hefzi Bom, Yebi Atzvoisam Achem Ahuri, Balasich Niskai Midam, Val Esa Shemoisam Alsafusoi, Adonoi Benos Chelki Vechoisi, Atutoimach Koiruli, Chavulim Naftli Libanimen, Aflachlas Shafu Eloi. Avura Chesadinoi Asher Yotzuni, Avlai Loi Sisrini Chilioisoi, Shivisi Adinoi Lenegdi Sumit, Kimimini Balemoid, Nuchain Sumach Libi Veyugal Kevoidi, Af Besuri Yishko in Levaya, Kilisazev Nafshi Lisho, Le Sitru Chasitru, Liroi Shuchas, Toidi Ein Yoirechayim, Soiva Samuchas Espenechun, Imois, Beminchun Eitzach. Nummer van de Mishpuche, nummer van de Brüder, de Alexander Rebbe, steht aan de meesten Tag van de Shiva de Nechemte, de eerste Tag van de 7 Wochen van de Nechume, auf de grootste Choben bij Samigdish, Yerushalayim is Churev geworden, Nächten gesucht Kindes, Tishabov, Choben Yerushalayim, Choben bei Samigdish. Die Schrinne ist weggegangen von Besamigdish. Die Gemurre sucht im Bruches, Rabbi Yossi, Pam Achas, Lech Nachsti, La Achas, Mechovis, Yerushalayim, mit der Sharanga in die ganze Gemurre dort. In alle Nuvi hat der Mugewad beim Tier, ist gegangen hin und zurück, was man gesucht. In jene Gemurre fiel dort aus. Elu, Bishush, Yesrul, Nechnusel, Buten Knesisel, Buten Bedrushes, von Jiden gehen heran in Schiel, ואוינן יהי שמע יגודל מבוירך הקדוש ברוך הוא ממנאי רוישוי ואוימה אשרי המלך שמקלסן בוי אויסוי in der Gemurre sagt noch ein paar Sachen, in der Gemurre fiet aus, wo oi loi lebunim shigulim al shulch naviem. Weiz die Kinder, wo sie vertrieben geworden von dem Tatenstisch. Hand, tuk noch Tischebov, steinens du, darf Masbet sein, unsere Cousin, a gute Freund, a Mishpuche Mensch, sich gehalten mit dem Mishpuche, alle Simches, alles gewesen auch heilig von dem Mishpuche, Rab Simcha Binem, Rab Chaim Zalman, Simcha Zilberberg. Simcha niftig geworden, Shabbos Kodesh, Tishabov in der Früh, steht, sehr seife toldes Udem. A Mensch ist toldes, a Mensch, was a Mensch geht dadurch, kann ich schreiben a Seife, a ganze Seife. Jetzt, a Simcha geht weg von der Welt, wir darf schreiben a Seife, toldes Udam für Simcha Zilberberg. Meine ich, als die passige Seife, was wir darf schreiben auf Simcha, ein niftig geworden Tishabov, ist a Kinnis. Man hat a ganze Kinnis, das man geklugt, auf Simcha darf man schreiben dem Kinnis. Steht, wo Usi li Migdish v'shechanti besoicham, besoichoi loi nema, ele besoicham, besoich kol echot ve'echot. Jede jüdische Jid, jede jüdische Neshumme, jeder Mensch hat der Chiev von Usili Migdish wie Shechanti bis Soichom soll machen bei sich ein Platz für Schrues Aschrinne. Jede jüdische Haus soll machen einen Platz für Schrues Aschrinne. Simcha geboren geworden, Tess Cheshvin Tuf Reich Tzadik Tess in Paris. Nifti geworden, Tess Tishbov Tess Uv Tuf Shiinayin Tess. Wir weißen, als zu nahe Duschen wird ein Kind geboren, das Kind heibt zu leben. Von Tess Cheshvin bis Tess Uv ist pink nahe Duschen. Stacke von Tuf Reich Tzadik Tess, Tuf Shiinayin Tess, aber der Geduschen ist nahe Duschen, Tess Cheshvin bis Tess Uv. Simcha gelebt ein Leben auf die Welt. Jetzt, geht darauf leben an nitzigste Welt, Leulam Habe. Simcha geboren geworden, ein Jahr noch mit dem, was geboren geworden, ist es bei Jusem geworden für seine Taten, geblieben ein klein Jusem. Gewesen 4 Jahre alt, ist es bei Jusem geworden für seine Mama. Die Mama soll sagen, sind aber Nächte bei Nacht gesucht, als der Tatensbrüder, der Fette, gewollt, soll sich raten werden, hat ihm herangegeben, so besucht die gedenkliche agorische Kinderheim, sie hat Klöster zu behalten Simcha. Simcha gewesen behalten dort, ohne Tate und ohne Mama. Später, ich komme in unsere Cousin, Buch Leib Obermann, wo es hat getan für die ganze Mischbuche, die Mama hat mir gesucht, an der Schrange, jetzt kann Putin, ist ihm gefahren, in Russland, der getan Sachen, was keiner hat nicht getan, ich komme auf 2 Tage Russland, rausnehmen, Heschel und Mirken, zurückgefahren. Bei mir wie gewisse du a Kosen ist gegangen rausnehmen, oder sich gewisse du a klein Jüngele, Simcha Zilberberg. Probiert alle Stadt Lunis immer rauszunehmen, ist nicht gegangen, hat mich immer neu von Gewalt rausgegeben von der goyische Hand. Der Tag was fette Gilke de Paul ist weggefahren von Paris, hat der Mama gesucht Nächten bei Nacht. Gegangen Buch Leib Obermann, hat rausgegangen mit Simcha von dem Heim, von dem Kinderheim. Hat gesucht von fette Gil, koidem nehmen mit kann Amerika, raus von Frankreich. Raus von Paris. So ich komme in Amerika mit Vertechil, hat gewohnt du. Bis Buch Leib Obmann ist rausgekommen, hat rausgekommen, hat reingenommen mit sich. Der Mama hat mir gesagt, hat mir Gadel gerehen, für ein Eigenkind, war Mitzvi gemacht, Haste gemacht, Mama ist für ein Eigenkind, der gewohnt dort. Später noch der Gassene, Simcha geblieben, wir wohnen im Bauernpark, ich wollte bleiben mit dem Mischbuche, nicht gegangen sichern in der Fremd, sich halten mit dem Mischbuche, davenen mit dem Mischbuche, kommen mit dem Mischbuche. Reingegangen, handeln, Misret, Matzliach gewesen aber als Ducke. Alexander Yeshiva allein, es gewesen die Gäste waren, der 2. Jahr geöffnet, die Yeshiva sich gelassen kosten, die kommen in Besmedrisch, sich gehalten mit dem Mischbuche. Gehabt Baruch Hashem 3 Kinder, sehr Baruch Hashem, eine Tochter, ein Eidem, 2 Sien, Chaim und David, Eidem, David Winter, einiglich. Durchgegangen, noch den Tekifis, hat sich gedreht. Und bis jetzt, der letzte paar Jahre, Simcha gewesen nicht gesinnt, hat sich gemitscht. Die Kinder haben sich auch gegeben mit ihm, aber auf Simcha habe ich keinmal gut nicht gesehen. Simcha gewesen mit Kabelkolluden bis Eiverpun im Jufis, sich keinmal nicht zugerät. Sie wollte keiner nicht gewiss, dass durchgegangen ist, ein Leben. Es wird keiner nicht gewiss, auf viele Weise hat gewiss, dass es nicht gesehen auf ihm. Hat nicht gewiss, was geht da durch. Auf Simcha kann man suchen, in der Pusik von die Woche Pasches, wo es Chanen steht, auf Pusik. In der Pusik kann man suchen auf jeden Jid, was durchgemacht im 2. Weltmechumme, dem größten Choben. Kimi goi gudoil, ashe loyle kim kroivem Eilof, kashemele keine Becholke reine Eilof. Kimi goi gudoil, wie noch du als ein größ Volk, ashe loyle kim, was der Middes adin, kroivem Eilof machten, nehmte zum Eibischten, weil Jid weiß, kashemele keine, sei de Shem Levaya, sei Hashemele keine, Becholke reine Eilof. Alles ist von dem Eibischten, und alles darf zum Eibischten. Simcha hat sich keinem nicht Misraim gewähnt, keiner hat nicht gewiss, umgegangen mit der Simcha, mit der Zufriedenheit, ohne Tate, ohne Mama. Auf einen können wir sagen in Pusik, Eulehem lebunim shigulim ashulchen aviyem, was die Gemurre im Bruch gesucht, wenn loi mila amivim, tak ich gewähnt mit Schulchen aviyem, der Chob, Europa, alles ist ausgeheilt geworden, seine Tate, Mama, die Schinne, Bes Migdish hat alles durchgemacht, eine Tage niftig geworden, Tishabov. Oi loi lebunim shigulim al shulchan aviyem, in Afa Piken, ist gewähnt, Hashem keinem Becholke rein Jailof. Jetzt, wir steiten der ersten Tag von Shiva der Nechemte. Es sahen an der Chumme wird sahen, von der Mischbuche, von Simcha, als der Tochter, der Älteste, der Eide mit ihren Kindern, Chaim, Dovid mit dem Mischbuches, sollen warten, Mamschich sein, sich halten auf dem Weg, sind aufgezogen geworden, der Hashem, Yirai Hashem, holchen mit der Hashem, sich halten mit dem Mischbuche, sich führen, warten, sie haben sich für Weben nutzen lernen, als Simcha und Tate Mama, hat so gekannt umgehen, am Seiboch schon gehabt, Tate Mama, als Stieb, ich gedenk noch, mein Vater des Adavnerrufen später, bei uns, im Rav Tevel, Simcha jeden Schabbos, sie laufen mit den Kindern daven, und die Kinder gegangen mit den Taten, sie haben gesehen, sie haben mitgehalten, und jetzt, du sie sagen, der Chumme, für jedem einen, als er zieht sich weiter, die Goldenigkeit. Jetzt, wir darf sich gesegnen, mit unseren Cousin, Agita Freund, im Beten, Simcha, so seiner Meile Zioische, für die ganze Mischbuche, für alle Cousins, für alle seine Agita Freund, Simcha hat das auch Agita Freund, wie gegangen, wie hat gedavent, ob ihm lieb gehabt. So seiner Meile Zioische, für die Kinder, die Tochter, der Eidem, David Winter mit den Kindern, Chaim, David Zilberberg mit der Wabe, die Kinder, der Einiglich seiner Meile Zioische beten, also sie können Warte führen, in Gedenken, von wann sie stammen, von der Wusse Mischbuche sei kommen, sich Warte halten mit der Mischbuche. Jetzt, Fach, Messiaen, beten und seine Meile Zioische, von Mischbaches Obermann, wo es hat gewohnt mit sie, alle Juren wie Brüder und Schwestern. Ich befragt von David, sich gehalten an seinen Ruf mit ihm. David hat noch gewähnt, dass sie wusste, mit Hammes, hat ihn gesehen, gesagt, ich gewähnt in Kantik mit ihm. In Mischbaches Bidemann, Rabbi Yossel zu sein gesinnt, und Bnei Bayis und die Kinder, wo Simcha, und nicht gewähnt dort wie ein Cousin, und nicht wie bei mir daheim, nur wie ein eigen Kind. Wenn er gewollt, wenn er gedarf, dann ist er gewähnt für ihn. Soll es eine Meile Zioische, also sollen sie nachher für seine Kinder, teure sie schon mehr beruchen, und für die ganze Mischbuche, wir sollen schon mehr nicht hören, kann schoit wie Scheverbig, wie Leini. Ich habe Messiaen sein, mit dem Pusik, von der Teure, wo es niftig geworden, Shabbos Chazon, wo Shivu Shaftayach Kevrushoinu, wo Yotzayach Kevatchilu, ziehen bemischbet te Pude, beshuveyu betzeduku, man soll solche sein, zu die Größen Nechumme ist ziehen wie ihre Shaloye, beim Heir wie meine Umein.
We're going to have several kapitel of Tehillim read before we have a few speakers. First, we're going to have a kapitel of Tehillim by David Winter, husband of Shoshana Winter, oldest child of Simcha Zilberberg. David's going to read Parak Aleph.
Ashrei ha'ish asher lo halach be'atzat risha'im, u'v'derech chata'im lo amad, u'v'moshav leitzim lo yashav. Ki im b'torat Adonai cheftzo, u'v'torato yegeh yomam v'layla. V'haya ke'etz shatul al palgei mayim, asher piryo yitein b'ito, v'aleu lo yibol. V'chol asher yaseh yatzliach. Lo ken arisha'im, ki im b'motz asher tidfo ribo, tidfenu ruach. Al ken lo yakumu risha'im b'mishpat, v'chata'im b'adat tzadikim. Ki yodea Adonai derech tzadikim, v'derech risha'im toved. Au revoir, mon amour.
Close friend of Simcha's, David Halberstam, will read the next kapitel of Tehillim.
Israel David Adonai Miyugi Miyus kan bahaka techu Hoyle Tumen Hoyle Tedek Dora Emes the Vuhoi Rugalan Rugal Kaino Lurai Ru the careful news for Toy News about the Fumos as you are the Noy Habai Ich Balora lo you make us for the net Kirk on the kilo koch Oi silent when you might the Yolo
Technology permitting, the next parak of Tehillim is going to be read by Rav Yaakov Feitman, the Marada Asra of Kilas Beis Yehuda Tzvi in Cedarhurst, and David and Penina Zilberberg's rabbi. Not sure if this works.
Going to say Kapitel Kuf Chaf Aleph. Shulam Alois Esoina Elehorim Me'ayin Yovoy Ezri Ezri Me'im Adoinoi Oisei Shomayim V'oretz Al Yitei Lamoit Raglecho Al Yonum Shomerecho Hinei Lo Yonum V'lo Yishon Shomer Yisrael Adonai Shomerecho Adonai Tzilecho Al Yad Yeminecho Yamam HaShemesh Lo Yakeko V'yoreach Baloilom Adonai Yishmorcho Mikol Ro Yishmor Es Nafshecho Adonai Yishmor Teisecho V'yecho Me'ato V'yad Oilom.
Family members are going to tell the story of Simcha Zilberberg's life. Simcha was blessed with wonderful children, Shoshana and David Winter, Chaim Zilberberg, and David and Penina Zilberberg, and was a loving grandfather for Ben, Sarah, Hannah, Rosie, Eliza, Moshe, and Ella. And they're the ones who can tell the story best. They're the ones who also remember all the wonderful times from the years growing up and his vibrant years before the last couple of years, which were much more challenging, but which they lovingly took care of him, especially the Riverdale crew, doting on him, bringing him into their home as often as he would agree. We're going to hear first from the oldest grandchild, Ben Winter.
Yesterday, we, as a Jewish nation, Klal Yisrael, mourn the loss of the Beis Hamikdash. Today, we mourn the loss of the Beis Hamikdash of our family. David HaMelech writes in Tehillim, Ivdu es Hashem b'simcha. In order to be a true Eved Hashem, you have to do it b'simcha. That was his name. It didn't matter how bad things got. I'd always come into the room when he was in the Hebrew home. No matter how he was feeling, we always crack jokes, have our private languages together, our secret language together, and always have a good time. It really didn't matter what was going on around him in the world. Things were going bad. He didn't really care about the gashmias. He didn't really care about the physicality. Inside, in his heart, is a neshama that is still with us and in his entire family. He was always besimcha. The Gemara in Chagiga on Daf Tes that describes the difference between a Pashad Yid, someone just a normal Jew, and a true Eved Hashem. And the Gemara says the difference is between someone who's just a regular Jew and someone who's an Eved Hashem is someone who learns something 100 times and someone who learns something 101 times. So frek the Gemara asks, 101 is really that different than 100? 101, it's only one more time. So the Baal Shem Tov answers, he says that's not what it's talking about. It's not the number 101. The lashon of the Gemara is mea ve'achas, meaning that all the 100 times that he did something for his avodas Hashem, he did it with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. He did it with simcha. As I said, in order to be a true Eved Hashem, you had to do it with happiness, with excitement, with charisma. And that's who Simcha Zilberberg was. Someone who lived his life b'simcha. All of us should in our lives understand that this is how we should live. No matter how bad things get, we should learn from Simcha Zilberberg that really, behind all of the bad, at the end, eventually it will be good. With the building of the Beis HaMikdash, b'mehir Rabbi Yameinu, Amen.
Simcha's son David is our next speaker.
We're all, every one of us is a product of the people around them, the people who love them, our family, our friends. But when it comes to my father, even more so. We heard a little bit about my father's story. Many people here know the story from hearing it from me or hearing it from him over the years. And David Singer touched on some of the points in Yiddish. But but as anyone who knows my father's story, he wouldn't have lived the life he did without the help of the Yad Hashem, of course, and the people around him who cared for him. My father was born in November 1938 on the eve of World War II in Paris. And he was only able to survive the war because his mother, who hid him before the war, or arranged to hide him before the war in various homes, Catholic families associated with the church, who hid him. He was raised in these homes as a Catholic. He didn't know of his religious identity at that age. And his mother had the foresight to contact, during the war, when she knew she wasn't going to make it, to contact her uncle in Pittsburgh to make sure that after the war was over that he would be located and brought here and be raised by his family. After the war, so that was his mother. After the war, he was in a DP camp outside Paris, and there was a Rosh Yeshiva of the yeshiva that he attended that was set up by the Joint in the area where all the Jewish refugees were, who basically gave him his basic Jewish identity and the fundamentals of Yiddishkeit that ensured that he would grow as a frum Jew. And after and of course his extended family, as you already heard, located him after the war and ensured his passage to the United States. And once in New York City, with several members of his extended family, Chiel Topola and Benny and Rachel Oberman, who raised him as a child. And I just want to take this opportunity to publicly thank all of his extended mishpacha who for everything they did for my father. And finally, at the end of his life, in his final years, it was my sister Shoshana and her husband David who gave their time and their energy and really all their strength to give him the best family life he could have while he required medical and nursing professionals when he was in Riverdale, and also Chaim when he was in Brooklyn and really living by himself. And thank you for being there for him. But of course, it's all about what you make of your life that Hashem gives you. And I don't want to let the focus on the miraculous events that preserved him and saved him to distract from the life he lived. My father lived his life more than anyone else I know as it was truly a gift. My father loved Torah and he loved Yiddishkeit. When he was a young child in the yeshiva that I mentioned earlier, my father, despite having been raised in places completely foreign to Yiddishkeit up until that point, literally hid under the bed of his Rosh Yeshiva when an uncle of his who wanted to raise him as a secular Jew came with the police to look for him. He then went, after he came to the United States, he went to the Lubavitcher Yeshiva in Brooklyn, and throughout his life developed a very strong kesher to the Lubavitcher Rebbe, and would always go to his Farbrengens and meet with him. And he even took me before my bar mitzvah to meet with him. And one of the ways I was able to bring a smile to his face when I would visit him over the past couple of months is just play him a little bit of a snippet of a clip of a Farbrengen of the Rebbe on my phone. As a father, he would always make sure to learn with us. I remember specifically how he used to be Maver Sedra with us every Friday night. And when he was a successful businessman, he always made sure he gave financial support to the institutions that were important to him, including the Moshe of Alexander and the Sadovna and Tarasemis, the yeshiva I went to and Chaim went to, and Shalamis, where Shoshana went to. He was also a very enterprising businessman. He came to the U.S. without anything in his pockets, but he had the drive and the business sense and personal charm to become a very successful person financially. Whether he was traveling halfway across the country with a friend to Columbus, Ohio, to sell aluminum siding, or sweeping the floors of a clothing factory, my father understood the value of hard work and ultimately built a successful national sweater business that enabled him to support us and support the Mostos that he loved. Chaim would tell me that even when he moved to Riverdale within the past several years, he would ask him about making investments on his behalf. I don't know how those worked out, Chaim. We'll look into it. He was also a very charming person. He was one of the most charming people I knew. He was funny. He was witty. He had a magnetic personality that helped him be a successful person. And anyone he met instantly drew to him. He truly personified his name, Simcha, and he lived his whole life with happiness. As a father, he was always, making jokes, singing silly songs on the guitar, always cheering us up, and especially our own children. As a grandfather, they loved his silly songs and corny jokes. And even when he was ill and hooked up to tubes and machines, he always tried to sweet talk the hospital staff into another pill, another sip of apple juice, whatever it was that he wanted. He always was able to create a kesher with the hospital staff, and when he was unfortunately a return customer, they would remember him from, I was on the other floor, I was here a different time, and they all remembered Simcha. He was also someone who was always plugged into what was going on in the world. Anyone close to him knew what he meant when he asked for the papers. It meant he wanted a copy of the Yiddish Forward, the Allgemeine Journal from left to right, the New York Post, whatever else it was, the Jewish Week. He used to read everything. He was a high school graduate. He did not go to college, but he had a tremendous breadth of knowledge about the world and instilled that interest into all of his children. I just want to, give a karsa type to him for all he did for us, and he should be a male Yaisha for us.
Words to describe my father: devoted friend, beloved Zaidi, life of the party, people magnet, charmer, storyteller, entrepreneur, balstaka, survivor, fighter, wholehearted, persistent, devoted, Evet Hashem. There are so many words that come to mind when I think of my father, Simcha, Bonam, and Chaim Zalman and Riza, but of all the adjectives I think to best describe him, there's only one word that truly captures his essence, which exemplified every moment of his 80 years in this world. And it's a recurring theme today. That word is Simcha. From the day he entered this world until his last breath, my father embodied the true meaning of Simcha. The Hebrew word Simcha is the most recognized word for happiness. It's considered a gift to mankind, and as it says in Parsha Shoftim, Vahiyita ach sameach, you should have nothing but joy. Anyone that ever met my father, shared a Shabbos meal with him, sat near him at Minyan, had a casual conversation with him, could never fathom how someone who always seemed so happy had survived so much loss and pain. That a man that survived World War II as a hidden child came to this country all by himself, never having experienced the love and presence of his own parents, could find a way to build a life for himself, start his own family, and shower them with love and every advantage, experience loss of family and business, experience illness and recovery and illness again, who never gave up starting over, who went from living in luxury to accepting more modest surroundings, and through it all managed to find pure, unadulterated joy in every day. I don't remember a day that I didn't know my father's origin story. It was a fact of our lives, and it's one that he never hid from us. In fact, he made sure to tell us about it over and over again. It was the subject of countless school projects. We went to see the Louis Malle film, Au revoir les enfants, which is very similar to his story, together when I was 16. He supported me when I joined the young leadership of the first Holocaust museum, the Museum of Jewish Heritage, and he participated in Names Not Numbers, sharing his story with high school students in film, and of course came to share his story countless times in David and my children's schools on Yom HaShoah. As a child, it was such a natural part of our lives, I think I almost took it for granted. And as a result, I never truly appreciated what it meant for him to be so joyous despite the sadness of his childhood and the challenges of his adult life. As many of you know, the last few years, my father's life became much smaller. The kidney illness that he had managed to fight had begun to gain momentum, and he lost a lot of the things that once brought him joy. Driving his car, sharing Shabbos meal in his home, attending school events for his grandchildren, going to social functions with friends and family. Everything became harder. But instead of complaining, he continued to seek joy in his immediate surroundings. One Shabbat afternoon, while visiting him at the Hebrew home, I asked him how he was doing, if he was happy. He looked at me from his bed, at this point not leaving it very often, and said, "What's not to be happy about? You're here, I have my room, my TV, Chaim and David, my Anaklach, people who care for me. What's not to be happy about?" There's another rabbinic teaching concerning Simcha which points to the inner self as the source of contentment and joy. Ezehu ashir hasamech bechelko. Who is rich, that he rejoices in his own portion? My father truly lived his name. There is no one I have ever known who has been able to demonstrate what it means to be joyous in one's own portion. For that lesson and for that example, I will be forever grateful. Daddy, thank you for showing me what true Simcha is every day, for loving and supporting me through every phase of my life, and for making me laugh despite how difficult things could get. Thank you for being the very best ID to Ben, Sarah, Hannah, Rosie, Elisa, Moshe, and Ella. Your songs, jokes, lessons, and love have shaped who they are today. And I know that they will find ways to keep your spirit alive in their own families that they built. Be'emet Hashem, please forgive me for any moments of impatience or frustration. Much of it came from my own inability to show strength during your suffering. I want you to know how much I will always love you, how I will do everything I can to continue your legacy of true Simcha, even in your absence.
Unlike many people here, I didn't know Simcha's story when I first met him. I met him as Shoshana's father and as a loving father and father-in-law and grandfather, and as someone who was truly, truly magnetic in his personality, funny, sometimes unintentionally, and someone who, as Shoshana, David, and Ben have all expressed, someone who just had a certain remarkable quality and joy and fun in his day-to-day life. As David Singer was speaking about the Gemara in Brachos, which describes the power of saying Yehei Shmei Rabbah Mevarach, it occurred to me that that Gemara also helps us explain how he was able to be the person who he was, with his origin story such an important part of who he was, but still at the same time not to be embittered by that. If anything, that allowed him to live his life as a true gift, as was mentioned before. And that Gemara begins with one of the Tanaim entering into a churva, entering into one of the ruins of Jerusalem to daven. And Eliyahu chastises him for doing so and says, you shouldn't have come in here to daven. You should have davened on the way. And I think that's something that Simcha intuited. Rather than dwelling in and revisiting in an unhealthy way the early years of his life, he was able to keep moving on, to be able to daven along the way, recognizing the Churban that he had survived miraculously, but also knowing that it was up to him to keep on moving, to build, to live his life to the fullest. For that, we're all incredibly appreciative to have known him, to have interacted with him, to have been able to participate in his 80th birthday celebration, along with friends and family. And I'm sure, given how he lived his life, not just the beginning of his life, but all of his life, that he will continue to intercede on our behalf, that he will continue to bring that simcha to where he is now. And the job for all of us, and especially for his amazing grandchildren, is to take those lessons and to continue to live a life of simcha, a life which continues to move on, recognizing the Churban. But just like we get up on Tisha B'Av and we realize that there can be nechama, so too, in continuing to live up to the legacy of Reb Simcha Bunim ben Chaim Zalman, we will continue to live and live b'simcha. Immediately following the funeral, we'll go to Beth Israel Cemetery in Woodbridge, New Jersey for the burial. The Shiva will begin later this afternoon. All of the children will be sitting at first in Cedarhurst at the home of David and Penina Zilberberg, 383 Oak Avenue. Later on in the week, Shoshana will be shifting to Riverdale on Thursday afternoon at 451 West 260th Street. Please rise for the Kel Maleh. El Maleh Rachamim Shochein Vamromim Hamitzei Menucha Nechona Al Kanfei Ashchina B'Ma'alos Kiddoshim U'Tehorim Kizor Harakia Mazhirim Es Nishmas Reb Simcha Bunim ben Reb Chaim Zalman Shalach Li'olamo Bavur Shanachlu Mispalim Barazkaras Nishmaso Bigan Eden Te Menuchaso Lachein Balarachamim Yasti Reu B'Seiser Kanafav Li'olamim V'Yitzror B'Tzror Chaim Es Nishmaso Adonai Unachlaso V'Yanuach B'Shalom Mishkavo V'Nomar Amen.